So, is my screen visible to everyone?
Yes, Srinjoy. So,
Hello, ma'am. Your voice is
yeah,
not audible. Hello.
it's visible now. Yeah,
Okay,
hello.
okay, okay,
Yeah,
okay,
it's actually
okay,
not.
okay. So yeah, okay. Let's get started and let me present this. So yeah, so welcome to I welcome all of you to this webinar on the quintessence of quantum machine learning. So this is a fairly new field, and as I received responses that many of you have heard and many of you have not heard, those who have like worked on quantum computing, they have heard about this fascinating term. So where machine learning meets quantum computing. So yeah, let's get started with this. This is a interesting topic for discussion, and it's a fairly new field. So there may be many questions which are still incomplete, and all is in the research phase, and people from all over the world are doing research on this field to find answers to many questions. So yeah, before I begin, I have to just remind you all that I have to keep on accepting whosoever comes. So it may be a bit annoying, but it's because of Google, because they have removed that feature. So even I can't help, and the extension is also not working. So yeah, so a little bit about my background. I have around 4 years of experience in quantum computing, and I started studying this in my undergraduate days. I met a professor who helped me get started in this. I was having interest, and currently I'm pursuing a master's from Spain in quantum computing technologies. This is the first cohort of that master's, and also I'm leading a quantum machine learning study group and authoring a book on quantum computing using Silk programming. So basically, Silk programming is a new high level language, just as you have for classical computing like C++, Java, high level languages. So a very similar kind of language for quantum computation. I also have experience in AI and machine learning, and I have worked on several projects related to computer vision, self-driving cars, and classification problems, as well as uh, regression problems and like that. And I attended and completed several more courses on quantum computing. So basically, my background is from signal processing, and I went to IIT Kanpur for taking signal processing research based courses and worked under a professor there. And from there only I got started with machine learning, deep learning, and then slowly quantum computing as well. So this is the overview of the webinar which we are going to do. So I will just explain you some brief applications about the quantum machine learning where it can be applied today, even though this field is evolving, and still this is a like a research question where we can actually apply QML. And it's not very clear because the quantum computers we have today are noisy. So yeah, they won't give you a perfect accurate answer because the qubits itself are noisy and they are not perfect. So we need quantum error correcting codes for them. So yeah, that's a different field of studies. I won't go into that. And again, I think someone came. No. Okay. So yeah, and then we will go some brief discussion because I saw that the background is diverse here. Some people have knowledge about machine learning, some people do not know quantum computing, some people know quantum computing, some people do not know machine learning. So yeah, so keeping that in mind, I will just cover a brief overview of quantum computing and machine learning to get everyone into a same level. So yeah, let's get started. So as you see, machine learning, so this is very natural that yeah, quantum computing is now used in machine learning. So how it is being used is that you can encode a big data set into several quantum bits. We will discuss this about quantum bits very soon. And after encoding, you can use some circuits, some parameterized circuits to train on that data to find useful information, to extract useful information. So that's one of the like field where quantum machine learning is gaining an advantage, because quantum computing, as you see, is inherently parallel. So it's not something like classical computing. In classical computing, you have studied that it's based on sequences. Okay, it's all the operations on classical computing are sequence based, so they run in a sequential manner. But in quantum computing, everything happens in a parallel manner. And that happens because of the phenomena of superposition, as we will see. So because of that, quantum computing, you can say it's like a big GPU. It's a big graphic processing unit. As you know, graphic processing units have parallel architecture. So you can imagine quantum computer to be a big GPU, but with special features taken from quantum mechanics: superposition, interference, and entanglement. So those three combined, it's like a big GPU, but quantum. And there are applications of quantum machine learning in chemistry. For example, you use quantum machine learning to like model molecules which can further be used for developing new drugs, new medicines. For example, many people are doing research on how to cure cancer. So for those, as you know, cancer is a very complicated disease, and it's very difficult to cure. So for that, you need huge amount of parallel power, not classical computing sequential power, but parallel power to simulate and model those drug molecules, which are usually very it's like a very long chain. The molecules have a long chain. And similarly, new kinds of materials can also be developed using this field of quantum machine learning. So just 1 second, let me check who are trying to join. Okay, all right. So, and finally, like as you this you might know or not know, but many international banks such as Deutsche Bank, Barclays, etc., Goldman Sachs, and all these financial institutions, they are actually using quantum machine learning and quantum computing for optimization of various portfolios, of various profiles of customers, for investments, and all those things. And there are other things also, like in financial. If you dive deep into financial mathematics, you will see that there is a process called like a sampling process is also involved in finances, which uses Monte Carlo simulations to model behavior, or to model stock behavior in finances, and like that. So all those things require huge amounts of data and huge amounts of parallel power, which is difficult to do on a classical computer, because it is having a limited power. As you know, it's sequential, so it's quite limited. And so what we have on quantum computing, as I told you, is the phenomena of superposition, which makes the quantum computer to be able to be in a complex linear combination of many states. And in interference, a phenomena called wave function collapse happens, by which when you measure something, and you get a measurement, and then if you measure that again, then if you measure for example a particular quantum state, then you will get the same quantum state again and again. So all those phenomena happens because of interference. And let's see that in superposition, if you see this diagram, so the diagram on the right hand side, you can imagine it to be a sphere. and in those spheres there are lots of quantum states. So if you see the notation, we denote this is known as a ket 0. This is a ket notation, and we use a bracket notation in quantum computing to denote the quantum state. So as you see here in the blue, in the left diagram, you can see two states, 1 and 0. They are the your normal digital logic, your classical computing logic. And on the right hand side is the equivalent of quantum, where you have a sphere. This is known as a block sphere, and on this block sphere you can visualize all the quantum states. So you can see it can be 0, it can be 1, but it can be also a complex linear combination at the same time. So 0 and 1 combined together in a complex way. So that's what we call as a complex linear combination. So sometimes people say it is like at the same time they are present, but what really it means is that it's a complex linear combination. And there can be 2 to the power n states, where capital N is the number of qubits. So if you have 2 qubits, then you will have 4 states, and so on. So now you can see how the quantum computers gain power, and they gain this power exponentially. And the phenomena of interference, as I mentioned you, whenever the we always assume that the states are in a superposition, and it helps you to measure a particular quantum state at a time. And this phenomena happens because of interference, and you will see that if you measure uh, this superposition, ket 0 plus ket 1 divided by root 2. So root 2 is done for normalization. It's necessary for quantum states to be normalized according to the laws of quantum mechanics in quantum physics. So if you take this and if you measure this state, then what will happen is that you will get back only one quantum state with a certain probability. So the probability is usually given by the mod square of the coefficient. So for example, ket 0 has coefficient 1 by root 2, and ket 1 has coefficient 1 by root 2. So according to that, you will get the measurement. And I can just show you this if I can open, um, if I can see it here. All right. So I don't know whether, let me see whether this works or not. Mm, all right. Okay. Can you all see the screen? Is this screen visible to everyone? The whiteboard?
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah. Your screen is visible.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, I just wanted to confirm. So last time also in the last webinar, I use this. It's really helpful to show you by writing how all these things work. So if you see the thing which we discussed, let me switch back here and then let me open it. It will be easy. So if you see this by interference, so if you see by interference, we can measure this. So if you have this superposition state, you can actually, what are the coefficients? So coefficient of roots ket 0 is 1 by root 2, and for ket 1 is also 1 by root 2. So What about measurement? So probability, if you want to measure, so probability of measurement of 0 is given by the absolute value squared. Now and for this also similarly, probability of 1 will also be half. But what you see here is that now if you in the first time of measurement, if you found p of 0 to be half, if you measured the superposed state and if it collapses to quantum state 0 with half probability, then if you re-measure it again immediately, then you are going to keep on finding the state 0. And this happens because of the phenomenon of interference. And next is the phenomena of entanglement. So this is really interesting. So let me show you. Uh, so what happens in entanglement is that it's a phenomena where the things, the quantum states, basically, not the things, the quantum states are so much like they share their properties. Basically, they are correlated. They share their properties so much closer to each other that if you can find properties of one state, then you can find the properties of another state. So, for example, let me show you that this state is an entangled state. And how you know this is by checking whether this state can be broken into tensor products or not. So tensor products, we have the notion of tensor products. If you studied in your linear algebra classes, so using the notion of tensor products, we can define that whether this state is really entangled or not. And by the way, this state is known as a Bell state. This is known as a Bell state. So it is one of those states which are known to be entangled. So you can check individually and add and like the method is as follows. So this this is now a two qubit state, as you see. One qubit is only one zero, and then since there are two zeros, that means two qubits. And what you and this is written like this. So this is the symbol of tensor product, and tensor product is able to create superpositions. That's why Cartesian products are not used. You might ask this question that why not Cartesian product and only tensor product? So that's the reason, because tensor products are able to preserve superpositions. They are only able to create, and Cartesian product does not. So now if you mathematically represent these as column vectors as follows. So like this. So if you take the tensor product like this and like this, so what you do is that you do this element will be multiplied by with this and this, then this element will be multiplied with this one and this one. So we will get this as follows, like a four-dimensional column vector. So 1 into 1, 1, 1 into 0, 0, then 0 into 1, 0, then 0 into 0, 0. This we get for 0, 0. Now if you do the same for 1, 1, and I will show you how do you check entanglement, how will you find out the entanglement, that are they truly entangled. So for 1 you have this, it is represented with this column vector. So quantum states are basically column vectors, as you see in mathematical terms. So and now if you do the same process again for calculation, you will see 0, 0, 0 into 1, then 1 into 0, then 1 into 1. And now what happens is that if you add these two together, so if you add them, Okay, if you add them, then what will you get? It's just a same column vector addition you have already studied. So 1 0 0 1. Now if you assign these columns as names, like to check the entanglement process, we do this w x y and z, and to check entanglement you do this operation wz is equal to xy. You verify whether these two are equal or not. If they are not equal, that means the states are entangled. So here if you see, wz means 1 into 1 and x into y, that means 0 into 0, and they are not equal. 1 is not equal to 0, and that tells you that this state is entangled. Now if you check for only the 0 0 state, you will see that it can be really broken, and that's why we have broken into tensor product, you can see. So you know that this qubit state is actually not entangled, but the Bell state is entangled. So this is an interesting calculation which I always show, because I also find this very interesting to, like, how do you verify entanglement process. So yeah, so let's move. So that's the some basics of quantum computing. And you have, just as you have classical logic gates, you have quantum logic gates, and due to time constraints I won't be going deep into this, but there are lots of resources available in the internet, and if you have any doubts you can ask me also directly. So these gates, for example, Pauli X gate is very similar to your classical NOT gate. It just flips the bit, and this is the operator, what we call as an operator. So in quantum computing, this operator, when it acts on a qubit, the state 0 1, which I told you, qubits, it acts on that, and then it flips the bit. So if it is 0, get 0, you will get a get 1. If it is get 1, then you will get a get 0. So like a bit flip operation, similar to a NOT gate. But the difference between quantum logic gates and classical logic gates is that these gates are unitary in nature. So that means inputs are equal to the number of inputs are equal to the number of outputs, which preserves the reversibility of the logic gates. In classical computing, you cannot preserve reversibility, but in quantum logic gates, that happens. That phenomena is there, and it is important to note this. And these are single qubit gates. Hadamard is a special gate. It creates your superposition. So Hadamard can be used to create that state which we saw earlier. So let me, yeah, this state which you see, get 0 plus get 1 divided by root 2, this you can get by Hadamard. And one interesting thing I want to show you is that if you have, if you have the Hadamard, okay. So if you have the Hadamard, and if it acts on 0, then you get this state 0 divided by root 2. And if the Hadamard acts on 1, get 1, the qubit 1, then it gives you this state. But now, as you know, and this state is also known as a plus state, and this is known as a minus state. Now there are basis state notations, and I will not go into so much details about all those stuff, but this is also known as a plus minus basis. As you see, 0 and 1 are usually commonly known as the Z basis, the Z basis, and plus minus are known as the Hadamard basis, or the diagonal basis. So diagonal basis. These consists of the diagonal or Hadamard, because Hadamard gate creates this basis. Now also it is important to note that now the reversible nature is also true, and you can verify this for yourself later, that if you do Hadamard of plus, then you will go back to 0, and if you do a Hadamard of minus, then you will go back to 1. So that's what I wanted to mention, this about reversibility, and this happens with every quantum logic gate. I think someone came. Yeah. And these are some 2 qubit gates, as you saw, 00, ket 00, ket 11. Those are 2 qubits. These are the 2 qubit gates, and the Toffoli gate is a 3 qubit. As you see, there are three lines. So each line is, you can consider it as a quantum state, or a qubit. And Toffoli gate acts on, like, if the first two, like the black dots, if you see the in the for the Toffoli, the black dots, if the first two are 1 in the state 1, then only the third bit, the last one, the last line will be flipped. So if it is 0, it will get to 1. If it is 1, it will get to 0. And similar operation for control NOT as well. Control NOT is a very special gate. Just like Hadamard, it is also used to create entangled states, just as we saw now. So interesting thing to note here is that if you really want to create this, if you want to create this state, then the quantum circuit is shown as follows. So it starts with a 0, then you apply a Hadamard gate, and after applying Hadamard gate, this is the control, and here you create a target. So if you have this operation, this actually gives you this same state. This quantum circuit gives you that same state. Now let's move and let's see. This was a brief introduction to quantum computing to bring everyone into the same level, and now let us go through some overview of machine learning. So many of you, I saw that you are from data science and software engineering background, so yeah, you might have already some good idea about machine learning, but still, just to bring everyone to same level again. So it has three divisions, as you see: supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement. So for supervised, what happens is that you have the data with their labels. So the labels, they act as a teacher. So what they do is that they say the model that, okay, like, this is the answer, and now you need to train yourself to learn this answer. So for example, if you have a model of many dogs and cats images, and with each dog image you will have the label that it's a dog, and with each cat image you will have the label that it's a cat. So dog can have some features like flappy ears, and cats can have something like a triangular ears, and pointed nose, and some all those like features. So what the machine learning algorithm does is that first the features are extracted, and then the features are trained upon into that model, so that the machine can learn from that. So machine is basically your computer here, and this term is like a misnomer, because mostly in machine learning you will see that the techniques of statistics are being used a lot. So it's more like a statistical learning, and this term was created by IBM for marketing purpose, because, as you know, this is like a fascinating term that a machine is learning. So it creates the notion in our mind that, okay, like, our computer is behaving like humans, and it's becoming artificially intelligent. So that kind of concept. And these are the most basic machine learning algorithms, supervised and unsupervised. I have mentioned them both. So you have regression, decision trees, and if you identify, many of these are based on statistics and linear algebra. So one of the most common model which I want to give you an intuition is about the neural networks, because it's very famous, you know, like deep learning is very famous. Deep learning is just a subset of machine learning. Neural networks themselves are machine learning algorithm, but now they are like now since they are like very powerful and they like work in fascinating ways, like a black box model. They are able to identify features automatically. So that's why they are now given a special category called deep learning. So that's the essence. So here you see a simple neural network. The green dots are the inputs. So, for example, you can have the images of dogs or the cats as input. Then, in the dark blue, you have this in the dark blue, the middle layer. It is known as a hidden layer. So, what happens is that you give your data to the neural network, and these hidden layers are able to extract the features present in that data. So, for example, flappy ears for dogs, and triangular ears and pointed nose for cats for distinguishability, for classification. And then on the pink dot in the output layer, it's like you predict a binary label 0 or 1. So, for example, if 0, it's a cat, and if 1, then it's a dog. And this process, the neural network process, is basically a black box because you do not know how the features are actually being extracted, because it's difficult to describe the statistical properties happening during the learning process. In other machine learning algorithms, you can definitely explicitly calculate many things, but in neural network, it's more like a black box. And this is active area of research today, that how these networks actually learn. So it's a strange thing, but yeah, we humans only created this, and now but we created something so much wonderful and fascinating that now we all are trying to find out the mystery of the learning process. But yeah, it's inspired from our brains. As you see, all these dots are basically neurons, and that's why it's called a neural network. Since all these neurons are connected, that's why it's a network. So that's the like main idea. Like what you need to know here is that all these are, there are parameters called weights. Those weights are being trained, those weights are being adapted to identify. After your output layer, you have a function known as a cost function, and that cost function actually decides how much the model like how well the model is performing after comparing it with the true label. So, for example, you input a dog and it identifies it as a cat. It's a mistake. So, the cost function will recognize this, and its value will go high to say its value will go high. Its value will be higher, and that will say the model that okay, model, you are okay, neural network, you are now making a mistake. It was a dog image, but you are identifying it as cat. So change it immediately. So all those, that process, that value of cost function will be fed back into the system of the neural network to make it realize that yes, it has done a mistake, and accordingly the weights will be tuned. So all the like for example, let me show you. uh, okay, so if you see a neural network, what is happening is there's this thing, that if you have this input, this is the input layer, and this is the hidden layer, and this is the output layer. So you have all these connections, you have all these connections. Okay. and then all these are going to the output this way. This will produce an output, and then this output will go into a cost function, and then this cost function will decide how well your model is performing, and this feedback of the cost function will go inside the neural network again, and this process is repeated, and this process is known as training. And what it does is that each of these is abbreviated by layers. So like this is like a W1 weight, and this is like a W2 weight. So each of these are weights. So it's like a weighted linear combination happening in each of the neurons, and like all these weights are updated. So in the training process, all these weights will be updated, weights updated. And now there are separate algorithm. For example, you might have known about stochastic gradient descent. So you use these kinds of optimization. It's optimization algorithm. It's an optimization algorithm to optimize the weights of the neural network. Optimization. That's your main job here. And please remember all these concepts, because now what we are going to discuss in quantum machine learning is very, very similar to this process. Very, very similar. Where does the difference comes, I will show you, but the process is very similar. You optimize the weights so that your model can now predict good results, and cost function is to give feedback to the model that what happened, where are you making mistakes. So it's like a it's like a head teacher, you can say that. Okay, like where are you like making mistakes, and you should learn from your feedback, and yeah, you should keep on improving and keep on learning. So something like that, you can imagine. And so now let's move forward. So now we start with the quantum machine learning, as you all are now on the same level. So now you can see, as I told you about weights, this is a very simple model, and it's known as a variational circuit. So what happens is, as you saw those weights, here you have the thetas. These thetas are rotation angles around x and y axis respectively. X and y axis of what? X and y axis of that block sphere, which I showed you before. This sphere. So in this sphere, you have x, y, and z. Here you can see the 2D only, but imagine it to be a 3D. It's a sphere. It has x, y, and z axis. So all those theta 1, theta 2 are the rotations. And what happens is that you are rotating these angles by and these angles are your variational. Variational means these are variable. These can be tuned. So we use this word tuned. So the process during the training, which was happening in neural network here, that was weight tuning by training. So here weights are tuned. Here you can imagine those very similar to the thetas. And this variational circuit which you see here is the essence of quantum machine learning. So very similar to a neural network. Now you can take your qubit, you perform some rotations, and you learn, and you make measurement that where will the qubit be. So you want your this circuit to learn that where will the qubit be from, like from the zero, or will it go to the one state, or will it go to the superposition state. So what kind of rotations it should take. So these parameters are tunable, and these are tuned using the stochastic gradient descent, as I will show you in a notebook very soon, the Jupyter notebook. So what we have in quantum machine learning is this table where you can see that we have the classical algorithm, quantum algorithm, and what we are mostly focusing on nowadays is the classical data and quantum algorithm. So most of the research is now focused around this point, that we already have a lot of classical data, we already have a lot of classical data sets, We are now finding ways to encode that data into quantum states and then use that to train variational circuits, something like this. We are going to train these kinds of circuits. So here you have a basic QML architecture, very, very similar to the neural network training process, which I showed you. You have this U of theta is the variational circuit. You take a measurement, you see what is your result, whether it is a cat or dog. Okay, you predict the label. That's Y is the label. It predicts whether it is a Y, it is a cat or dog, and then it is compared. Your measurement is compared with the true label, and then cost function determines how much well your U of theta, your variational circuit, is performing, and then its result is fed back into the update theta mechanism, which is your stochastic gradient descent algorithm, and then it starts the training process. Basically, it tunes your thetas. Thetas are your variational parameters. So it tunes your theta, it updates your theta to let the model know where it is making mistakes. If it is not making mistakes, then the theta change, the update of the theta value will be very little. If it is making a lot of mistakes, then it will be a lot of changes. And so yeah, that's like the really that essence of quantum machine learning architecture, which you can see here, very, very similar to classical machine learning. But the only thing is that most of the processes which you see here, like the measurement, prediction of labels, comparing, cost function update, all these things are done on classical computers. So only the quantum part only is the like your data encoding, like converting your classical data into quantum states, and then using those quantum states to train your to fed into your variational circuit model, quantum circuit, which has variational parameters. So that's the essence. So only quantum part is on the left hand side, rest all are classical. So that's why there is a lot of research also like going on quantum data and quantum algorithm, which is this one. But for now, we have a lot of classical data, so that's why this is more easy to do. And now this is interesting part. So here you see this is the same model. You can see it's a same kind of model, but the only thing is that you have the encoder, which is all quantum, then your weight theta 1, weight theta 2. So again, theta 1, theta 2 are the tunable weights of your quantum neural network. So now this is a quantum neural network architecture. Your M is measurement, which is classical again, and you can see how this is very similar. So what basically happens is you do something like this, that I can just show you a rough picture of what this may look like. So what it looks like is this, that if you have a QNN, if you have a QNN, okay, QNN, that means quantum neural network. You first have your like all the bits, okay, have all the bits, and this is your like all the qubits which are initialized as zero or like some state, some quantum states, okay. And what you do, this is your classical data. So you can imagine this to be your classical data. This classical data goes into the encoder, okay, it goes into the encoder. And encoder, what it does is that it converts all the classical data into quantum states. After you have that quantum states, then you can have like you can perform some circuits, and there is a good research paper which I will share you later. So you can perform like some Rx theta 1 and some rotations like this, then again Rx 2, and so on. And then to make to harness the power of quantum computing is to use entanglement. And now you already know which gate creates the entanglement. It's the CNOT gate, which is this one. So you use CNOT gates to harness the power of quantum computing. Okay, that's the main reason why you are using CNOT gates. Okay, why not any other gates? So that's the basic reason, because you need to, like, first of all, harness the power of superposition and entanglement to really take advantage of the quantum computing power, to really take advantage of the quantum mechanical properties which physics offers you. So in something like that. So if you see, you just take all these and do just alternate entanglements, and then you again apply some rotation gates. This time you can apply ry of theta, for example. You can take it as theta 5 or something, then ry of some theta 6 or something, and then it will go on. Okay, and again you can apply some z rotations. So this circuit, you see, this circuit, this one, this block is like a hidden layer of your classical neural network. So this block is actually, if I say it a block one, this block one is actually, this block one is similar to this diagram. Sorry, here, these this hidden layer, you see this hidden layer, this block is very similar to that hidden layer with all the variational parameters, and these parameters are only trained. And then now if you want to have more hidden layers, then what should you do? Just repeat this block, that's it. So what you do is that again you take these rx and all these things and you keep on repeating, and then you again apply entanglement. Okay, some alternative entanglement, go like this. These are rz, again parameterized by some theta. Then again you apply some ry. So this block 2, this is again one of your something like a hidden layer. If you just make an analogy with the classical neural networks, that's what is happening, and that's the essence of a quantum neural network, which I'm trying to explain you. So the process is very similar, but what you do is that you make rotations on your qubits, okay, which you are trying to, and you harness the power of superposition and entanglement of quantum computers to make circuits which can be trained. And after this process, when you make the measurement, so after you make the measurement, you get the label, then you get the cost function and all those stuff. All these things happen uh, with the classical. These all things that happen in classical computer. So this happens in classical computers, and this part, all these part, these are all on a quantum. These are all on a quantum computer. Okay, so that's the essence which I want to, like, make you understand here. So I think, okay, nobody joined. So, and now let me show you the demo. Okay, I think we are almost there. We are almost complete, and yeah, let me show you. So here you see where PennyLane is a very top quantum machine learning library, I would say, and it's developed by a company called Xanadu, and they make these nice quantum machine learning demos you can find in their website. So I'm going to show you a demo from there itself, and it's a very simple demo. So I'm going to import this library. I'm going to run this code. And NumPy, as you know, many of you might know, NumPy is used for numerical Python. That means linear algebra calculations and mathematical calculations. So after you import these libraries, and we are importing PennyLane as an alias QML. After you import, Then what you do is that you select a QML device, and there are lots of QML device. So basically it's like setting up a quantum device means it's like a quantum simulator. So you have this quantum simulator which will simulate your quantum states, your like the quantum computation which is happening. And you have wires one, that means a single qubit, okay, a single quantum state. And you define a decorator, so you create a queue node. So what are these? I won't go into much detail. So what is a queue node? Yeah, if you want to know more, I can conduct a workshop later on quantum machine learning that will go into much more details about the practical implementation aspect. But yeah, this queue node is something required to be run on your device. That's how Xanadu has maintained it. So you do it with this decorator at the rate QML, and then you make this circuit. So you remember the circuit which we studied just now, this one, Rx theta 1. So same circuit we are making here, Rx Ry, with parameters, the parameter 0 parameter, that means theta 1 theta 2, basically theta 1 theta 2. Wire 0 means single, it's acting on the same qubit. Same qubit means this one, first you go this get 0, then it acts on this. So first Rx, then Ry. So very same circuit we are making. And we make the measurement on the Pauli Z basis. As I told you, 0 and 1 are the Z basis, measurement computational basis. It's also known as a computational basis. And plus and minus, as I told you, it's the diagonal or Hadamard basis. So we are making, to make our life easier, we are making the measurement, we're making the measurement on computational basis. Then we define some, okay, so let me keep running. And to run all these Jupyter notebooks, you just press Shift plus Enter, which will also take you to the next cell. So you will already know this. And let me run this. And now we have params. So these are the tunable parameters, as I said to you. So you can begin with some initial values, and you can have the circuit print. So it's going to 1. So by default, the qubit is starting from zero state, and you are making some rotations, which is making your qubit go into state 1. And in this case, we have defined our cost function to be the circuit, but you can definitely, as I told you, you can define your cost function to be something else. But for simplicity purpose, you can define your cost function to be circuit, so that like you can analyze where the circuit is like making mistake, how optimized, how good your circuit is, your quantum circuit is. Now we start with some initial parameters like 0.11 and 0.5, and the goal will be to go from 0 to 1 state. Okay, the goal will be to go to 0 to 1 state with the help of optimizer. And what this will do is that it will try to find those parameters. This optimization method will try to find the parameters which are best suited to go from 0 to 1 state for the Rx and Ry rotations. That's the main stuff happening here. So as you can see, the more this number is, more is the cost. That means the closer you are to the value of that state. So for this state, for 0.11, 0.5, you see that we are almost closer to 1. That means we are almost closer to this state. Let me show you. In that sphere, we are here in ket 0, in qubit 0. We want to go here, qubit 1, and we want to find those rotation angles. That means those variational parameters, theta 1 and theta 2, param 0, param 1. We want to find them. What are those optimized values which helps you make this rotation, qubit 0 to qubit 1? So that's the main purpose of this. So now if I run this cell, you can see there are 100 steps. And now you see after each step, you can see it starts from a negative 0.415, and then after 10 steps you can see that the value has converged to 0.99, and finally after 25th step it is perfectly -1. So since we are measuring in a z basis, so that's why it's showing us -1, and -1 actually means that you have you are actually here, because z state, let me show you this, that if you see the z gate, what the z gate does is that if you have z gate, if the z gate acts on 0, it does nothing to that state. But if the z gate acts on 1, it introduces a phase, so you get this. So that's why you are getting a -1 there. That's the main reason. That's how, and this is 0 and 1 is the computational basis as well, as I mentioned before. And it also show you the optimized rotation angle. So you can see 3.14, that means your value of pi, and 3.6 into 10 to the power e minus 17 means 10 to the power minus 17. So that means 0.0000 something, like it's like you can consider it to be negligible, like 0 only. So 0 and pi, so 0 and pi are really the rotation angles, and now you can verify that it's really 0. So on the x axis you do not need any rotation, but if you consider this as the y axis toward this side, then on the y axis if you make a pi rotation, then you will really reach to 1. So that's a training of the variational circuit, where you initialize some parameters and it goes from those parameters to something closer. So that's the main demo I wanted to show you here. And with that, I finished this here. And if you have any questions to ask, please go ahead.
Thank you, Sanjay. It was really very good.
Yeah, thank you.
Students, if you're having any doubts, you can unmute yourself or you can also chat, like type in the chat box.
Yeah, you can type in the chat box, and I'm stopping my screen share.
If you're having any doubts, you can ask. If no questions, Sanjay, thanks a lot
Mhm.
for giving an awareness on quantum computing and machine learning. And I hope our
Thank you,
students
ma'am.
will, you're welcome. And I hope our students and my staffs and my friends will dig on more into it. And we'll get back to you if you're having some more doubts or anything. Maybe
Definitely,
you can
definitely. You
share
can.
your mail ID to the group so that
I will share my, yeah, I will share my LinkedIn profile, and yeah, and mail ID as well, so that you can contact me. And yeah, please go ahead and send me a connection request if you want to know more about this fascinating field. It's really nice. And my mail address, so anytime like you want to know something about this field, or machine learning or quantum computing or anything, just yeah, you can ping me there on the mail, because on LinkedIn I receive a lot of messages and it's really difficult to reply there. But yeah, if you mail me, you will get a prompt reply from me, and it's much easier to monitor also, as I open mail a lot of times in a day. So yeah, that's the thing.
thank you. If no more questions, I once again thank Sanjay and all the participants for attending this webinar.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you so much everyone for joining. Yeah, thank you, ma'am.